The manila envelope on my desk bore my own handwriting, addressed to me from a storage facility I'd closed 3 years ago. I stared at the security footage timestamp. 2:47 a.m. last Tuesday, showing someone in my house, sitting at this very desk, going through my locked drawer. My hands trembled as I recognized the silver bracelet on the intruder's wrist, the one I'd given to my best friend of 23 years. Good day, everyone. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now, let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. I rewound the footage again, my finger stabbing the pause button until the image froze on her face. Lorraine Mitchell, my friend since our daughters were in kindergarten together, crouched over my personal files with a cell phone camera clicking away at every document. The blue light from her screen illuminated features I'd trusted more than my own sisters. My stomach lurched as I watched her photograph my divorce papers, my therapy records, the letters from my estranged son that I'd never shown anyone. The envelope contained printed screenshots of text messages. My text messages. The private ones I'd sent Lorraine about my breakdown last year, about the medication, about the night I'd considered ending everything. But these screenshots came from someone else's phone, formatted differently, forwarded and discussed. I spread them across my desk like obscene playing cards, each one a fresh violation. My office phone rang. Through the glass wall of my corner office, I could see my assistant hovering, concerned. I let it go to voicemail, unable to tear my eyes from the final photo in the envelope. Lorraine and Regina Hartwell, my former business partner, the woman who'd tried to destroy my career 5 years ago, sitting together at a restaurant, laughing, their heads tilted close like conspirators. The date stamp read 3 months ago. 3 months of sharing lunches while Lorraine came to my home every Friday, while she held my hand through my mother's funeral, while she collected my secrets like specimens. I pulled up my email, my vision blurring at the edges. The sender of the envelope had included a digital folder. 57 emails between Lorraine and Regina, spanning back 8 months. My cursor hovered over the first one as sweat beaded on my upper lip. The subject line read, "Cynthia's psychiatric evaluation, attached." My door opened without a knock. Lorraine herself stood in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups from the cafe downstairs, her smile warm and familiar. She wore the cashmere scarf I'd brought her from Paris. My chest constricted, making each breath feel like swallowing glass. "Rough morning?" She moved toward my desk, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I closed my laptop screen, but the printed photos remained spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. Her eyes caught them, and I watched the color drain from her face in real time. The coffee cups slipped from her hands. Brown liquid spread across my cream carpet, seeping into the fibers, while steam rose between us like a barrier. "Sin, I can explain." I stood, my chair rolling back and hitting the window with a sharp crack. My hands pressed flat against the desk, the only thing keeping me from lunging across it. The silence stretched taut as a wire. She took a step backward, her mouth opening and closing, searching for words that could possibly matter now. I moved around the desk, each step deliberate, measured. My reflection caught in the window behind Lorraine, jaw clenched, shoulders rigid, hands balled into fists at my sides. She backed against the doorframe, her knuckles white as she gripped the wooden edge. The printed photographs crinkled under my palm as I gathered them into a neat stack. My medical records, screenshots of text messages I'd sent her at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep, a photo of my prescription bottles she must have taken during one of her visits to my home. Each piece of evidence slid into place like puzzle pieces forming a devastating picture. "How much did she pay you?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. The detachment surprised even me. Lorraine's chin trembled, but I felt nothing watching her discomfort. No sympathy, no urge to smooth things over like I'd done 1,000 times before in our 20-year friendship. It wasn't about money. Her voice cracked on the last word. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off my office walls. The stack of emails went into my briefcase next, each page a testament to systematic betrayal. 8 months. While I'd confided in her about my anxiety medication adjustments, while I'd shared my fears about my competency review at work, while I'd broken down about my mother's final words in hospice, she'd been documenting everything, photographing everything, sending it all to Regina Hartwell, the woman who'd been trying to force me out of my VP position since the day I'd been promoted over her son. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from an unknown number. Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. today. Regina filed formal complaint. Friend in HR. The timepiece on my wall showed 11:47, 2 hours and 13 minutes to prepare for professional execution. My hands shook as I reached for my laptop, but I forced them steady. Lorraine still hadn't moved from the doorway, blocking my only exit like a ghost haunting the scene of its own crime. I swept the coffee-soaked carpet with my eyes, calculating. The stain would be permanent, much like the damage she'd inflicted. My mother's silver pen, the one I'd let Lorraine borrow last month, sat on the corner of my desk. She'd never returned it. Another small theft among the larger ones. Move. The single word carried the weight of everything unsaid. Lorraine's eyes widened, filling with tears that I refused to acknowledge. She shifted left, pressing herself against the wall to let me pass. I grabbed my briefcase, my phone, my coat from the hook. My shoulder brushed hers as I moved through the doorway, and she flinched like I'd struck her. The hallway stretched before me, fluorescent lights harsh and clinical. My heels clicked against the tile in a rhythm that matched my racing pulse. Behind me, I heard Lorraine sob, a broken, desperate sound that once would have stopped me cold. Would have made me turn back, comfort her, prioritize her feelings over my own. I kept walking. The elevator bay came into view. 3 colleagues stood waiting, their conversation dying as they registered my expression. I punched the down button with more force than necessary, the plastic cracking under my knuckles. Blood welled up from a split in my skin, a bright red dot against my dark brown finger. "Ms. Dupree, are you—" one of them started. I held up my bleeding hand, silencing the question. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that felt obscenely cheerful. I stepped inside alone, hitting the button for the 3rd floor. Legal department. If Regina wanted to weaponize my private struggles, she'd discover I hadn't survived 57 years by being unprepared. The doors began to close. Through the narrowing gap, I saw Lorraine emerge from my office, mascara streaming down her cheeks, reaching toward me like a drowning woman grasping for a life preserver. The metal doors sealed shut, cutting off the sight. My stomach lurched as the elevator descended, taking me down, down, down toward whatever came next. The elevator lurched to a stop on the 3rd floor. I pressed my bleeding knuckle against my coat, watching the fabric darken as the doors slid open to reveal Legal's polished mahogany reception area. The scent of leather and expensive coffee hit me, power wrapped in pretense. A young paralegal I didn't recognize glanced up from her desk, eyes widening as she took in my disheveled appearance and the blood on my hand. I moved past her without acknowledgement, my body a missile locked on target. The brass nameplate I needed gleamed at the corridor's end. Peter Whitmore, General Counsel. Peter's door stood ajar. Through the gap, I could see him hunched over his desk, silver hair catching the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. His fingers moved across his keyboard with methodical precision. I didn't knock. My palm connected with the door, slamming it against the interior wall hard enough to rattle the diplomas hanging there. He jerked upright, reading glasses sliding down his nose. His mouth opened, but I was already moving, planting both palms on his desk and leaning forward until our faces were inches apart. "Regina Hartwell knows about my daughter's arrest," I said, each word clipped and sharp. "She knows about the rehab, the miscarriage, things I told exactly one person." Peter's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He set his glasses down with trembling fingers, the metal frames clicking against the wooden surface. Outside his window, the city sprawled indifferent below us, thousands of lives unfolding while mine unraveled. I straightened, pacing the length of his office. My reflection caught in the window, wild-eyed, coat askew, blood still seeping from my hand. I looked like someone who'd come unmoored, and maybe I had. 23 years with this company, 2 decades of perfect performance reviews, of eating whatever they served me with a smile, of being twice as good to get half as far. "What do you need?" Peter asked quietly. I spun toward him. He'd risen from his chair, hands raised in a gesture somewhere between surrender and offering. The fluorescent lights above hummed, a constant electrical whine that suddenly seemed deafening. I became aware of my own breathing, ragged and harsh in the silence between us. Her office communications, emails, texts, calls, everything from the past 6 months. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, thumbs moving across the screen. "I'm sending you dates, times, conversations I had with Lorraine that Regina somehow knew about word for word in yesterday's budget meeting." Peter's jaw tightened. He moved around his desk, closing the distance between us, but stopping just beyond arm's reach. Smart man. The air felt charged, dangerous. My body vibrated with barely contained fury, muscles coiled and ready to strike at shadows. "That requires authorization," he began. "Then get it." The words came out flat, final. I watched something shift in his expression. Calculation giving way to decision. He'd seen me negotiate million-dollar contracts, watched me dismantle hostile acquisitions with nothing but facts and force of will. But this was different. This was personal warfare, and we both knew the rules changed when blood was in the water. He returned to his desk, picking up his phone. His fingers hesitated over the screen, and I saw the moment he committed, shoulders squaring as he made the call that would set everything in motion. While he spoke in low tones to someone in IT, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of his window. Below, tiny figures moved along the sidewalks, oblivious. Cars streamed past in orderly lines. Normal people living normal lives where best friends didn't betray you to your enemies. My phone buzzed against my hip. I pulled it out. A text from Lorraine. "Please, let me explain. It's not what you think." My thumb hovered over the screen. Delete? Block? Something darker whispered that I should save it. Evidence, ammunition, proof of her guilt trying to masquerade as innocence. I let the phone drop back into my pocket unanswered. The motion must have looked casual, but my hand shook as I shoved the phone deeper into my pocket. Behind me, Evan's voice droned on, something about access levels and security protocols. I pressed harder against the window glass, watching my breath fog a small circle on the surface. The coolness did nothing to calm the heat spreading through my chest. Footsteps approached. Evan held out a printed sheet, fresh from his desktop printer, still warm to the touch. The header read, Secure Access Log, Dupree Corporate Account. My eyes scanned down the rows of data, timestamps, and IP addresses, creating a damning timeline. There, 3 weeks ago, Lorraine's workstation, accessing my private correspondence folders. Again, 2 weeks later, downloading attachment files from my encrypted storage. The final entry made my stomach drop. Yesterday morning, bulk export of my entire email archive. I gripped the paper so hard it crinkled. The dates aligned perfectly with critical moments. Right before my presentation to the board, when someone had leaked my strategy to our competitor. Right before the merger talks, when confidential terms mysteriously appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Yesterday, hours before I'd confronted Vanessa Chen at the industry mixer. There's more. Evan's finger pointed to an additional column. External transfers. She forwarded everything to an outside email address. The address belonged to Gregory Hartwell, my former business partner, the man who'd tried to destroy my company 5 years ago, the man who'd sworn revenge when I'd outmaneuvered him. My worst enemy. The air left my lungs in a rush. I bent forward, hands on knees, trying to process the magnitude of Lorraine's betrayal. This wasn't just gossip between friends. This was corporate espionage. This was calculated destruction. My vision narrowed to pinpoints. I straightened slowly, deliberately, folding the paper with mechanical precision. Each crease became sharper, more defined, as I transformed evidence into a weapon. Evan stepped back, recognizing something dangerous in my movements. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air. What would I do? The old Cynthia, the careful one, the strategic one, would have called legal, built an airtight case, destroyed Lorraine through proper channels. But that Cynthia had trusted her best friend of 15 years. That Cynthia had shared everything. Business secrets, personal fears, the combination to her office safe. That Cynthia was dead now, murdered by betrayal. I walked toward the door without answering. The hallway stretched before me, fluorescent lights reflecting off polished floors. My heels struck the tile in a rhythm that matched my racing pulse. Employees scattered as I passed, sensing the storm. Someone called my name, a junior associate with a question. But I kept moving, focused on the elevator bank ahead. The building's directory flashed through my mind. Lorraine's office was 2 floors down. She'd be there now, probably composing another manipulative text, crafting explanations that would sound reasonable until you remembered the documented evidence of systematic theft. My finger jabbed the down button repeatedly, though logically, I knew it wouldn't make the elevator arrive faster. The doors opened. A group of colleagues stood inside, chatting about lunch plans. They fell silent when they saw my face. I stepped in without greeting, turning to face forward as the doors closed. The descent felt impossibly slow. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed someone I barely recognized. Jaw clenched, eyes hard, shoulders rigid with contained violence. 2nd floor. The elevator chimed and released me into familiar territory. I'd walked this corridor hundreds of times, usually stopping by Lorraine's office for coffee, for advice, for the easy companionship of someone who understood the pressures of our world. Now those memories felt contaminated, every smile and confidence revealed as performance art covering calculated malice. Her door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see her at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something the other person said. The sound triggered something primal. I shoved the door open with enough force that it bounced off the interior wall. The bang echoed down the hallway. Lorraine's laugh cut off mid-note. She looked up, and the color drained from her face. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the desk. I watched her hand reach instinctively to steady it, then freeze halfway as if touching anything might trigger an explosion. Her chair rolled backward an inch, a reflex she probably didn't even register. The afternoon sunlight streaming through her window illuminated dust particles dancing in the air between us, each mote suspended in the electric tension. I crossed the threshold and kicked the door shut behind me. The slam reverberated through the small office, rattling the framed certificates on her walls. My hands were trembling, so I balled them into fists at my sides. Every muscle in my body coiled tight, ready to spring. Lorraine's eyes tracked my movement as I advanced toward her desk, her pupils dilated wide with fear. "Cynthia, I can explain." "Don't." The word came out low and dangerous. I planted both palms flat on her desk and leaned forward, bringing my face level with hers across the polished surface. My wedding ring clicked against the wood. She pressed herself back into her chair, trying to maximize the distance between us, but there was nowhere to go. The leather squeaked under the pressure. Papers scattered as my hand swept across the desk, sending files and a coffee mug crashing to the floor. Brown liquid spread across the carpet in a dark stain. Lorraine flinched, her arms coming up defensively, but I wasn't reaching for her yet. My fingers closed around a familiar manila folder partially hidden beneath a stack of reports. I recognized the tab, my handwriting, my private case notes. This was locked in my office. I straightened, holding the folder between us like evidence at trial. "In my desk, the one only I have keys to." Her mouth opened and closed without sound. A flush crept up her neck, blotching her pale skin with red. She gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. I watched her throat work as she swallowed, watched the way her eyes darted toward the door, calculating whether she could make it past me. I flipped the folder open and let the contents spill across her desk. Photographs of my vacation with James, private moments we'd shared at the beach house, medical records from my oncology appointments last year, the ones I'd hidden from everyone at work because I refused to be seen as weak. Financial documents showing the settlement from my father's estate. Personal correspondence with my attorney about the property dispute with my sister. Every secret I'd ever confided in Lorraine, now documented and organized with her characteristic efficiency. Post-it notes in her handwriting marked specific passages. Dates and times logged in her neat script. Cross-references to conversations we'd had. She'd weaponized my trust with the precision of a surgical strike. "How long?" My voice stayed steady despite the rage burning through my chest. "How long have you been feeding Barbara everything I told you?" Lorraine's hands moved to her lap, fingers twisting together. She looked down at the scattered evidence, then back up at me. Something shifted in her expression, the fear giving way to defiance, like she'd decided there was no point in pretending anymore. Barbara deserved to know what kind of person was working above her. Her chin lifted. Someone who lies about their health, who hides assets, who manipulates. My hand shot across the desk and grabbed the front of her silk blouse before conscious thought caught up with action. The fabric bunched in my fist as I hauled her forward, her torso slamming against the desk edge. Her breath came out in a shocked gasp. We were inches apart now, close enough that I could see the mascara smudged under her left eye, smell the mint on her breath from whatever she'd eaten for lunch. "You gave her ammunition to destroy my career?" Each word dropped like stones. My marriage, my relationship with my sister, everything. Lorraine's hands came up and latched onto my wrist, trying to pry my fingers loose. Her nails dug into my skin hard enough to draw blood, but I didn't let go. We stayed locked in that position, muscles straining, both of us breathing hard. The desk dug into my thighs. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. "You're hurting me," she managed, voice strained. "Good." I released her so suddenly she stumbled backward, arms pinwheeling for balance. Her shoulder blade hit the file cabinet behind her with a metallic thud that echoed through the small office. A potted plant toppled from the cabinet's edge, the ceramic pot shattering against the floor. Soil spread across the beige carpet in a dark stain, pieces of green leaf trapped in the dirt. My phone buzzed against the desk. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I grabbed it, thumb swiping across the screen. Text messages from my sister Elena flooded the display. Each one was a screenshot. Conversations I'd had with Lorraine about our mother's dementia, about the inheritance dispute, about Elena's drinking problem. Private words I'd whispered in confidence, now twisted and annotated in Barbara's distinctive red digital markup. The phone slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered against the desk. Lorraine straightened, one hand massaging her collarbone where my knuckles had pressed. She watched me scroll through message after message, her expression carefully neutral now. Professional. Like we were discussing quarterly reports instead of my life disintegrating in real time. "Elena says I'm dead to her." My voice came out flat, emotionless. The shock was setting in, that cold numbness that followed catastrophe. "She's contacted her lawyer. She's filing a restraining order. Maybe you shouldn't have called her a functional alcoholic." Lorraine's tone carried no sympathy, no remorse. "I only told Barbara what you said. She must have decided Elena needed to know the truth about how you really feel." My vision tunneled. The edges of the room went fuzzy and dark, Lorraine's face the only thing in sharp focus. I stepped over the broken pot, soil crunching under my heels. She pressed back against the cabinet, but there was nowhere left to go. I planted both hands on either side of her head, my palms flat against the cold metal, caging her in. "You destroyed my family." She turned her face away, jaw clenched. A muscle jumped in her neck. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, see the rapid flutter of her pulse beneath the thin skin at her temple. She was afraid again, that carefully constructed defiance crumbling. The office door burst open. I didn't turn, didn't move, but I heard footsteps, 2 sets, maybe 3. Strong hands gripped my shoulders and yanked me backward. I stumbled, my heel catching on the broken ceramic. Arms windmilled for balance I couldn't find. My hip collided with the desk corner, a bolt of white-hot pain shooting through the joint. Security. 2 uniformed guards I recognized from the lobby. The taller one, Marcus, according to his badge, kept his hand on my shoulder, applying steady pressure that forced me down into my desk chair. The other positioned himself between Lorraine and me, his stocky frame blocking my view of her. "Ms. Mitchell called us." Marcus's voice was even, professional, but his grip remained firm. "Said there was a physical altercation." Lorraine edged around the guard, smoothing her blouse where I'd grabbed it. The fabric was wrinkled, pulled askew, one button hanging by a thread. She picked up her purse from where it had fallen beside the desk, dirt from the broken plant streaking across the expensive leather. "I want to press charges." She addressed Marcus, not me. "Assault. I have bruises. Witnesses heard her threatening me through the door." The stocky guard nodded, already pulling out his radio. Static crackled as he spoke into it, requesting police response. My mind struggled to process the words. Police. Charges. Assault. The terms felt abstract, disconnected from the reality of what was happening. Marcus released my shoulder but remained close, his body language making it clear I wasn't to move. I stayed in the chair, hands gripping the armrests hard enough that my knuckles went white. The pain in my hip pulsed in time with my heartbeat, spreading down my leg in waves. Through the open door, I could see people gathering, curious faces peering in, phones raised to record. Barbara would be among them soon, if she wasn't already. This was exactly what she'd wanted. Public humiliation, incontrovertible proof of my instability. Lorraine had handed her the perfect weapon, and I'd wielded it against myself. Write block 7 below. Pure story text, no labels. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers pushed through the crowd that had gathered outside my office, their presence silencing the whispers and causing the phones to disappear into pockets and purses. The taller one, a woman with sharp eyes and silver threading through her dark hair, surveyed the scene with practiced efficiency. Her partner, younger and broad-shouldered, positioned himself near the doorway. "I'm Officer Chen," the woman said, pulling out a notepad. "Someone want to tell me what happened here?" Lorraine stepped forward before I could speak, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd produced from somewhere. The tears looked real enough, though I noticed they didn't actually fall. She gestured toward her throat, where faint red marks were beginning to show against her pale skin. My stomach clenched at the sight. Those were from my hands. "She attacked me," Lorraine said, her voice trembling. "I came to discuss a work matter, and she grabbed me, threw me against the wall, started choking me." Officer Chen's gaze shifted to me, taking in my disheveled appearance, the overturned furniture, the dirt scattered across the floor. I opened my mouth to explain, but Lorraine continued, her words tumbling out in a rush that sounded rehearsed. "She's been unstable lately. Everyone's noticed?" Making accusations, paranoid delusions about people conspiring against her. I tried to help, to be supportive, but she turned on me. The younger officer moved closer, his hand resting casually on his belt near his handcuffs. My pulse hammered in my ears. This was spiraling beyond anything I could control. Every word Lorraine spoke added another layer to the narrative she was constructing, and the truth, complex, messy, rooted in months of betrayal, seemed impossible to articulate. "That's not what happened." My voice came out hoarse, strained. "She's been feeding information to my colleague, sabotaging me. I confronted her, yes, but she has witnesses." Lorraine pulled her phone from her purse, scrolling through something. "I recorded part of our conversation earlier, before things got violent. You can hear her threatening me, accusing me of all kinds of insane things." She held the phone toward Officer Chen, who took it and listened, her expression neutral. Through the tiny speaker, I could hear my own voice, distorted but recognizable, saying words that sounded damning without context. The recording had been edited, I realized with growing horror. Lorraine had cut out her own admissions, leaving only my accusations and anger. Officer Chen handed the phone back and turned to me. "I'm going to need you to stand up, ma'am." "You're arresting her?" Marcus stepped forward, uncertainty crossing his features. "Look, I know this situation is messy, but Ms. Dupree's worked here for decades. Maybe if everyone just calms down." "Not your call, sir." The younger officer's tone was polite but firm. "Please step back." I pushed myself up from the chair, my hip screaming in protest. The room tilted slightly, and I grabbed the desk edge for support. This couldn't be happening. 57 years without so much as a speeding ticket, and now I was about to be arrested because I'd finally stopped taking Lorraine's betrayal silently. Officer Chen approached with handcuffs in hand, her movements methodical, almost gentle. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back, please." The metal was cold against my wrists, the click of each cuff closing sounding impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. Through the doorway, I could see Barbara had indeed materialized, standing at the edge of the crowd with her phone raised. She wasn't even trying to hide it now, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she captured every moment of my humiliation. The handcuffs were tight enough to bite into my skin. Officer Chen guided me toward the door, one hand firm on my elbow. Each step sent fresh pain shooting through my hip, and I had to concentrate on not stumbling. The crowd parted as we approached, faces I'd known for years now regarding me with a mixture of shock, pity, and poorly concealed excitement at the drama unfolding. Barbara lowered her phone as I passed, meeting my eyes directly. The triumph in her expression was undisguised, absolute. She'd won. Whatever game we'd been playing, whatever professional Cold War had been escalating between us, she'd decisively won. And Lorraine had been the weapon that ensured her victory. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, fluorescent lights harsh overhead. My colleagues pressed against the walls, giving us space but tracking every movement. I recognized Sandra from accounting, pressed against a bulletin board with her hand over her mouth. David from IT stood frozen mid-stride, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Their stares felt physical, adding weight to each step. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright after the office's artificial lighting. I squinted against it, stumbling slightly on the curb. Officer Chen steadied me, guiding me toward the patrol car parked at an angle across two spaces. The lights weren't flashing, at least. That small mercy felt laughable given everything else. The back seat smelled of disinfectant and old leather. Chen had to help me navigate inside with my hands cuffed behind me, the position forcing me to lean awkwardly forward. The door slammed shut with a heavy finality that made my chest tighten. Through the window, I could see Lorraine emerging from the building, still dabbing at her dry eyes, her other hand held protectively at her throat. She glanced toward the patrol car, and for just an instant, her mask slipped. The satisfaction in her expression was raw, unmistakable. Then it was gone, replaced again by the wounded victim persona she'd perfected. She turned away, accepting comfort from a cluster of concerned coworkers who'd followed her outside. Right block 8 of 10. The patrol car pulled away from the curb, and I watched through the rear window as Lorraine grew smaller, her figure still surrounded by the sympathetic crowd. My wrists burned where the metal cuffs bit into skin, arms wrenched at an unnatural angle behind my back. Every bump in the road sent a jolt through my shoulders, muscles screaming from the forced position. Officer Chen navigated through downtown traffic while his partner, riding in the passenger seat, typed notes into a tablet. Neither spoke to me. The radio crackled intermittently with dispatch calls, domestic disturbance on 5th Street, suspicious vehicle near the park. Ordinary crimes on an ordinary day. I pressed my spine against the hard plastic seat, trying to find any position that didn't hurt. My phone was in Chen's evidence bag up front, along with my building access card and the contents of my purse. I couldn't call my daughter. Couldn't warn her before she saw this on the news or heard it from someone else. The thought of Keisha learning about this secondhand made my stomach twist harder than the cuffs did. The police station loomed ahead, a squat concrete building that looked more like a bunker than a public facility. Chen pulled into the rear lot, parking near a metal door marked with peeling yellow paint. When he opened my door, the afternoon heat hit me like a slap. Sweat immediately beaded on my forehead, running down my temples. "Watch your head," Chen said, guiding me out with a hand on my elbow. My legs had gone stiff during the ride. I stumbled, catching myself against the car's frame, and Chen's grip tightened. We moved toward that yellow door, my feet dragging slightly on the cracked asphalt. A security camera mounted above the entrance tracked our approach with its unblinking eye, recording everything for posterity. Inside, the air conditioning was arctic compared to outside. Goosebumps rose on my arms as we walked down a narrow corridor painted institutional beige. Scuff marks darkened the lower walls where countless shoes had scraped against them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering erratically, creating a strobe effect that made my head pound. Chen led me to a processing desk where a heavy-set officer with gray stubble looked up from his computer. His nameplate read, Sergeant Morrison. He took in my appearance, the tailored suit now rumpled, the careful makeup probably smeared, the silver hair that had escaped its neat bun, and his expression remained professionally blank. "Assault?" Morrison asked. "Aggravated," Chen confirmed. He produced the evidence bag, setting it on the desk with my belongings visible through the clear plastic. "Victim required medical attention." Morrison's fingers moved across his keyboard, entering information I couldn't see. The clicking of keys seemed unnaturally loud. Behind me, Chen finally removed the handcuffs, and I bit back a gasp as blood rushed back into my hands. I brought my arms forward slowly, wincing at the stiffness, and rubbed my wrists where red marks circled the skin. "Empty your pockets," Morrison said, pushing a plastic tray toward me. I had nothing left. Everything was already in Chen's evidence bag. I showed Morrison my empty jacket pockets, turned them inside out to prove it. He nodded and made another note on his screen. The fingerprinting station was next. Morrison led me to a machine that looked like a sophisticated scanner, gesturing for me to place my hands on the glass surface. The light beneath glowed blue as it captured each print. Right thumb, right index, down the line, then the left hand. The glass felt cold against my skin. When it was done, Morrison handed me an antiseptic wipe to clean the residue from my fingers. "Against the wall," he said, pointing to a white backdrop with height measurements marked in black lines. I stood where he indicated, and a camera flashed twice. Front view. The light left spots dancing in my vision. Morrison gestured for me to turn sideways. Another flash. I wondered if Keisha would ever see these photos, if they'd become public record, if future employers would find them during background checks. Morrison led me to a small holding cell at the end of another corridor. The space was barely 8 feet square, containing a metal bench bolted to the wall and a toilet in the corner with no privacy screen. The walls were covered in scratched graffiti, names, dates, crude drawings. Someone had etched "innocent" near the bench in letters 6 inches high. The cell door clanged shut, the sound reverberating in my bones. Morrison's footsteps retreated down the corridor, growing fainter until I heard a distant door close. Then silence, broken only by the hum of ventilation and water dripping somewhere out of sight. I sat on the cold metal bench, finally alone with what I'd done. I pressed my palms against the cold metal bench, feeling the chill seep through my jumpsuit. My body ached from sitting in the same position for what felt like hours, though time had become meaningless in this fluorescent-lit box. The water continued its steady drip somewhere beyond the bars, each drop a metronome counting away the minutes. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. I lifted my head, squinting as 2 figures approached through the harsh lighting. Morrison appeared first, his keys jangling against his belt. Behind him walked a woman in a burgundy blazer, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive. Real leather, not the synthetic kind. "Ms. Dupree, this is Attorney Patricia Webb," Morrison said, unlocking the cell door. "She's been assigned To your case. Patricia stepped inside, her heels clicking against the concrete. She set the briefcase on the bench beside me and extended her hand. I shook it, noting her firm grip and the way her eyes assessed me without judgment. Morrison retreated, leaving the cell door slightly ajar. I've reviewed your statement, Patricia said, pulling documents from her briefcase. The district attorney is willing to offer a plea deal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I watched her lay out papers on the bench, each one covered in dense legal text that blurred before my eyes. Her manicured finger traced down one page, stopping at a highlighted section. Assault with a deadly weapon gets reduced to simple assault. 6 months suspended sentence, 2 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, and restitution for Lorraine Mitchell medical bills. The words hit me like physical blows. I gripped the edge of the bench, my knuckles turning white. Lorraine's name on these official documents made everything concrete, irrevocable. There would be no pretending this had been a nightmare I'd wake from. What if I go to trial? My voice came out hoarse from hours of silence. Patricia gathered the papers back into a neat stack. She clicked her pen twice, a nervous habit that seemed at odds with her professional demeanor. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the truth there before she spoke. With your confession, the physical evidence, and witness testimony, you'd likely face 2 to 5 years actual prison time. My stomach dropped. I thought of Keisha, of my grandchildren, of holidays celebrated through prison phone calls. I thought of my house sitting empty, my garden overtaken by weeds, my whole life reduced to a case number and an orange jumpsuit. Patricia pulled a pen from her briefcase and set it on top of the documents. The pen rolled slightly on the uneven surface before settling. She waited, her hands folded in her lap, giving me space to process. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours. The DA wants an answer by tomorrow afternoon. She stood, smoothing her blazer. The fabric whispered as she gathered her briefcase, snapping the latches closed with practiced efficiency. She paused at the cell door, one hand resting on the frame. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Use this time to think carefully about your daughter, your future. Pride is expensive, Miss Dupree. Morrison appeared to escort her out. Their footsteps faded, leaving me alone again with the dripping water and the weight of decision pressing down on my chest. I lay back on the bench, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles. Someone had thrown something up there once, a piece of toilet paper perhaps, and it had dried in place, a permanent reminder of desperation. My body felt heavy, gravity pulling me down into the metal with a force that made breathing difficult. The night stretched ahead like an endless tunnel. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, images cycled through my mind. Lorraine's face after I struck her, blood on my hands, Keisha's disappointed eyes when she learned what I'd done. Each memory was a lash, punishment I'd earned through my own choices. Morning came gradually, the overhead lights brightening in stages as if the facility itself was waking. Morrison brought breakfast on a plastic tray, eggs that looked gray, toast with butter packets, orange juice in a small carton. I forced myself to eat, though everything tasted like cardboard. My body needed fuel regardless of whether my mind wanted it. Patricia returned at 9 o'clock. I'd been awake for hours, watching the shadows shift across the floor as time crawled forward. She looked fresh in a navy suit, a different briefcase in hand, ready for another day of shepherding criminals through the legal system. Have you made your decision? I stood, my joints protesting after a night on the metal bench. My hands trembled as I reached for the pen she offered. The weight of it felt immense, heavier than the knife had felt in my kitchen that day. I'll take the deal. Block 1010. 6 months later, I stood at the kitchen counter of my new apartment, chopping vegetables with deliberate, measured strokes. The knife moved through carrots in clean slices, each piece uniform and controlled. Steam rose from a pot of rice on the stove, fogging the window above the sink. Outside, autumn leaves swirled in small tornadoes across the parking lot. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom unit in a complex that didn't ask too many questions about criminal records. Beige walls, laminate flooring that clicked under my feet, a bathroom with a shower head that dripped no matter how tight I turned the knob. But it was mine. No bars on the windows, no guards checking my movements every 15 minutes. I scraped the carrots into a bowl and started on celery, the crisp snap of each stalk satisfying against the blade. My hands no longer trembled when I held knives. The mandatory therapy sessions during my probation had taught me to recognize the difference between tools and weapons, between anger and hunger, between destruction and creation. The timer buzzed. I moved to the stove, lifting the pot lid to check the rice. Perfect grains, separate and fluffy, exactly as they should be. I stirred them once, then turned off the heat. Cooking had become my meditation, each recipe a series of steps that kept my mind focused on the present, rather than spiraling into the past. My phone vibrated on the counter. A text from my caseworker, confirming our appointment for Wednesday. I typed a quick response, my fingers moving across the screen with practiced ease. The monitoring device around my ankle shifted as I walked to the living room, a constant reminder of my conditional freedom. The couch I'd bought secondhand sat against the far wall, its brown fabric worn but clean. I'd spent hours scrubbing it with upholstery cleaner, working the foam deep into the cushions until my shoulders ached. Making things clean, making things right, these small acts of redemption that couldn't undo the past, but might somehow build a different future. I returned to the kitchen and assembled my dinner on a single plate. The vegetables, the rice, a piece of grilled chicken I'd prepared the night before. I carried it to the small dining table by the window and sat down, my movements careful and intentional. No rushing, no chaos. Keisha's birthday card sat propped against the salt shaker, unopened. It had arrived 3 days ago, forwarded from my old address through a chain of mail holds and redirects. Her handwriting on the envelope, neat and controlled, so different from the loopy scrawl of her childhood. I'd stared at it each morning during breakfast, unable to decide whether opening it would bring hope or devastation. Tonight, something shifted. I set down my fork and reached for the envelope. My fingers slid under the flap, tearing it open in one smooth motion. Inside, a simple card with flowers on the front. Her message was brief, just 3 lines in blue ink. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I blinked them away and read again. Not forgiveness. She was clear about that. But acknowledgement. She knew where I was living. She knew about the probation, the therapy, the community service hours I logged each week at the food bank. And she wanted me to know she was watching, waiting to see if I could sustain this new version of myself. I placed the card back on the table, propping it up so I could see it while I ate. The chicken had cooled, but I didn't mind. I chewed slowly, tasting each bite, feeling the texture of food against my tongue. These simple pleasures I'd taken for granted for so many years. After dinner, I washed the dishes by hand, though the apartment had a small dishwasher. Hot water ran over my fingers as I scrubbed each plate, each fork, each pot. The repetitive motion soothed something in my chest, loosened a knot that had been tied there since the day I'd struck Lorraine. I dried everything and put it away, each item in its designated spot. Order, structure, control over the controllable. The therapist's words echoed in my head during these moments, reminders of the tools I'd learned to manage the rage that had once consumed me. My laptop sat closed on the coffee table. I opened it and logged into the community college website, navigating to the page I'd bookmarked weeks ago. A certificate program in culinary arts, 10 months of classes, hands-on training, a pathway towards something productive. The application deadline was Friday. I clicked the link and began filling out the form. My fingers hesitated over the section asking about criminal history. The truth would disqualify me from some programs, but lying would only create more problems later. I checked the box marked yes and typed a brief explanation in the text field below. Completed probation for assault. Currently in compliance with all court-ordered requirements. The cursor blinked at the end of my statement. I added one more sentence. I am committed to using this education to rebuild my life and contribute positively to my community. Then I attached the required documents and clicked submit before I could second-guess myself. The confirmation page loaded. Application received. I would hear back within 2 weeks. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the couch cushions, exhaling slowly. One more step forward. One more brick in the foundation of this new structure I was building. Outside, streetlights flickered on as darkness settled over the parking lot. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Somewhere in this city, Lorraine was living her own life, carrying her own scars from our confrontation. I'd sent a letter through my attorney 6 weeks ago, attempting to apologize, to explain, to somehow bridge the chasm my actions had created. No response had come. Perhaps none would ever come. And Keisha, my daughter, was out there too, watching from a distance, measuring my progress against years of disappointment. The card was not an invitation. It was a notification. She was allowing me the chance to prove myself, nothing more. I returned to the kitchen and made tea, letting the bag steep until the water turned dark amber. The first sip burned my tongue, but I welcomed the sensation. Pain as a reminder of being alive, of having the opportunity to make different choices. Tomorrow, I would wake early and attend my support group meeting, then my shift at the food bank, where I'd help distribute groceries to families who needed them. In the evening, more therapy, more processing of the anger that still lived in me but no longer controlled me. Day by day, hour by hour, building something that might eventually resemble peace. The tea grew cold in my hands as I sat in the quiet apartment. No television, no music, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I'd learned to sit with silence, to stop filling every moment with noise that drowned out my thoughts. The thoughts needed to be heard, examined, understood. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the food bank. They needed extra volunteers on Saturday. I typed my confirmation, grateful for the structure, the purpose, the reason to get up each morning. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.